Welcome to Economics Unbound. Well, it's finally the festive season. The 1st of December, the first week of December. Well, Nana, I never saw it coming through this quickly. It's funny how time just expands and flies when you're really absorbed in working. And we have worked throughout the period of the COVID-19 virus. This is a time, the festive season, where people loosen their purse strings and prepare to enjoy the festive season and to buy local, some of them have decided, instead of buying imported products. And this could help the South African economy as well as our economic outlook in general. It has been a tough year for most South Africans and for the South African economy in particular, with that 51% contraction, the deepest economic contraction in almost 100 years. Now, we have dealt with the coronavirus in various ways. We've been successful in some ways and not so successful in others. Good evening.
Good evening, Thandeka. It's good to have you back on the show tonight. Yes, finally it's December. While normally, festive season consumers will be contributing to developing a stronger job market and rebuilding South African businesses. Although 2020 has been tough and the COVID-19 induced economic malaise, which contributed to a 48.9% drop in household spending, the festive season's direct spending could help the hotel, restaurant and recreational sector, where income plunged by 99.9%. It is here that spending could immediately help the sector regain some of its lost ground. This is according to Proudly South African. I really encourage South Africans to buy local products this festive season, as this could contribute to improving the country's economy.
Now, the lack of demand for South African goods and our reliance on imported instead of locally manufactured items is dragging the manufacturing sector down. Purchasing locally made clothing instead of items bought or made or manufactured in Asian countries could help the local textile industry and clothing industry, in which about 6 people a day lose their jobs. Traditionally, South Africans spend most between November and January, and during this time retail sales spike. Consumers are urged to examine the made-in labels on the goods for sale and opt for locally manufactured and produced goods. Now, this is a call from many in the country, including the President.
During the COVID-19 crisis, the focus on buying local increased as ports of entry were closed and the movement of goods and services were restricted. This had the effect of introducing local buyers to high-quality local options available at retail outlets. We need to emphasize that our country and people need this buying trend to continue. If we can make the return to local goods permanent, we will benefit.
That's very true, Nana. But do you think people should forget about Black Friday? It's a crazy day. It has been a tough time, especially because of the increase in the unemployment rate and all those retrenchments that we've seen throughout the year. Do you think this year we'll see a bleak Christmas because of this, and that the tills won't be ringing with the same Christmas cheer and vigor because of the worst unemployment rate in many years and the worst economic contraction and the worst retail spend in a number of years? Now, according to economists, retail analysts and trade unionists, this is cause for concern.
There will be changes in consumption patterns, and perhaps one of the things government can do to help out is to put politics aside and cancel some of the public holidays because people need to go back to work. Previous statistics from 2018 have shown that 66% of all local shoppers who take advantage of Black Friday sales spend at least 1,600 each on Black Friday bargains. In the final mix, billions of rands are spent during this period. Thandeka, let's hear what today's guests have to say about this.
Now, keeping the economy On the go, we have the South African Banking Risk Information Center CEO, Nishal Nawalal, to keep us informed as consumers about the latest banking scams and fraudster activities during the Christmas season, God forbid. Hello, Noel, how are you?
Hi, good evening, Tandeka, and good evening to all your viewers out there. Thank you for having me on the show.
Now, what do the fraudsters have in store for us?
Well, one of the most important things we need to keep in mind is that fraudsters are certainly this Christmas looking for cash, as you've explained earlier on, that there's lots of people that are unemployed, and often the fact that there's no income drives individuals in order to commit crimes. So one of the things we've been noticing is an increase in the number of individuals that are robbed soon after they are drawing money from ATMs. Alternatively, when they're making their way to the ATMs in order to make deposits, especially deposits in relation to stockpiles, and then especially when you're making those withdrawals after you've received, your grants or your employer has paid you. So that's one of the things that you've got to be on the lookout for. The other things that we are noticing that's on the increase, in line with the changes in the amount of purchasing that's going on at the moment, is online fraud, and particularly when it comes to the purchasing of goods, and that is especially high-value goods. And this is where you have been fished for your information from criminal syndicates, and they're using your information to purchase high-value goods like cell phones and tablets and laptops. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got things like alcohol, food, and airtime that's also being sold. So you just need to watch out for those two. And there's many others I will talk to you as we go along.
Okay, so with regard to those two, withdrawals of large amounts from ATMs and the crime risks contained in that activity, as well as purchasing online, what is your advice to consumers? What should they be looking out for? What shouldn't they be doing?
Well, there's a few things we need to watch out for. When we are approaching our ATMs, I think, your viewers should watch out for bystanders. Often you would find individuals loitering around the area with no necessary purpose in that space. So keep an eye out for individuals.
For loiterers.
That's right, people that may pose a threat to you. The second thing we need to watch out for when we're at ATMs is don't take assistance from individuals who are not bank officials. Now, all too often, you will notice that when you approach an ATM, there's somebody there that's willing to advise you and give you some assistance. But if that is not a bank employee, try to avoid any form of assistance at those ATMs, because you ultimately are going to reveal your personal identification number, and the individual is going to be having notice of how much of cash you're taking out.
So is it better to use your phone, perhaps, to make all those mega transactions that you tend to have to do, sending money this way, that way, paying debts, and also sending money to relatives in areas like...
Absolutely, Tandeka. You're absolutely spot on. In fact, we really encourage people to look at alternative methods of transmitting money. You could just as well use cell phone banking. Or alternatively, if you have the app on your phone, many of the banks allow you to be able to transact on app. And the last one we should watch out for at the ATMs is to just check that the device is safe. There are no mechanisms inserted into the device so that it is skimming your card. Never go to an ATM and try and force your card into the ATM. Certainly there could be something wrong there. So you need to watch out for telltale signs that the ATM itself could be manipulated.
So what are the telltale signs that an ATM, other than a blocked receptor, what are the other signs that we should look out for of an ATM that's not really safe?
Well, one of the things you could watch out for is you could look at the screen and check if you could identify some malfunctioning. We have seen instances where the entire front screen has been duplicated or replicated. The entire the ATM front face comes in a duplicate form. And so when you look at it, it actually looks perfect. But if you pay a little bit of careful attention to the machine itself, you'll be able to see that this machine is not looking right. The other thing you need to watch out for is we recommend to go to spots where you see that the ATMs are in frequent use. In other words, where the ATMs, the cash is being cycled continuously, and this is a good sign that that specific ATM is in continuous use and is in good and proper working condition. There's lots of other little technical nuances, but to the ordinary person, you're not going to see those changes that are done on the machine by a trained professional.
Now, you and I were speaking a little earlier, and you said that you've seen an uptick on online sales, and that is the promise of renewed activity in the retail space.
Absolutely. And I think it's firstly a very positive thing that many South Africans are moving towards digital interfacing on transactions. That's really the way to go. And it's all about giving the customer immediate satisfaction on the purchases that they make. But I think customers need to be careful and know that, syndicates are fully aware that many of us are transacting online. And so they try very hard to put in place mechanisms to either intercept the way our Wi-Fi devices work at home so that they're able to steal our information. They are planting links that come in emails in which we open them and then they embed themselves into our devices. And ultimately, the name of the game is to steal our identities, steal our personal information, and then use it so that they're able to perform online transactions as if they were you and I.
Now, what does this uptick in online sales mean for the South African economy?
Well, what it means is that certainly people are spending money, but they're choosing to spend their money in a non-face-to-face manner. In other words, they are opting for the safer route, apart from making sure you don't physically go into malls so that you are, keeping yourself safer from the COVID situation. But certainly it means that you are preferring to transact safer in the digital environment, and you are familiarizing yourself with the risks on a continuous basis, because many banks these days have put in a concerted effort to educate each time you open up the app about what are syndicates getting up to and how it is you can protect yourself. So certainly there's lots of education going about, as well as getting direct customer satisfaction in terms of execution on a digital platform.
Now, just for a bit of how the other half lives, what are people buying online? What are big ticket items, I imagine?
Yes, that's a good question. So, when we look at the types of frauds that take place, especially when we consider how credit cards are used, and then what are things that are being bought via the merchant process, certainly I've indicated that it's high-value commodities that can be unsold very quickly. So examples of that would typically be your laptops, tablets, as well as mobile phone devices. You see those kinds of high-end objects being the desired ones from organized crime syndicates. But on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, we have also seen very high amounts of purchases of alcohol, food, because alcohol and food now you can readily buy it online instantaneously, and deliveries are pretty quick. So people are opting, on the other end of the spectrum, large amounts of alcohol, food, and the other one, airtime. And often, it's very difficult to do any recoveries on airtime or the money spent on airtime. So certainly those three commodities are high on the food chain in terms of what syndicates are spending their money on.
Well, thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. And Nana, so tell me, what's your opinion on all of this?
Well, in my opinion, it does appear that South Africans at large are due for a bleak Christmas season ahead. Now more than ever, the economy requires stimulation and regrowth. Black Friday is the biggest opportunity afforded to the e-commerce industry for us to contribute towards that economic stimulation. With just 2.2 million jobs lost in Q2, it will take some time for unemployed South Africans to find their way back into the formal labour market, if they ever do. Currently, the Bureau of Economic Research Consumer Confidence Index sits at -23 for Q3 and bar the second quarter low of -33. This is the lowest on record since the first quarter of 1993, which was a recessionary period of great uncertainty just before South Africa's first democratic election.
Welcome back. Sentiment continued to improve in the construction sector. In the fourth quarter of this year, the FNB BER Building Confidence Index increased to 29% in the fourth from 24 in the third quarter. Despite the rise in confidence, the current level of the index indicates that more than 70% of respondents are dissatisfied with the prevailing business conditions. The FNB BER Building Index can vary between 0, indicating an extreme lack of confidence, and 100, indicating full confidence. The survey shows an uptick in the residential activity, but a further deterioration in non-residential activity. 4 out of the 6 sectors surveyed reported higher confidence, with sentiment among hardware retailers at a more than 5-year high. Support for the residential sector came from renovations and additions. Alterations came in there too, resulting from people now spending more time at home. This helped boost hardware retailer confidence. Building material manufacturer confidence slipped, however, in the fourth quarter. FNB economist Siphamandla Mkhwanazi says, despite the rise in confidence this quarter, the outlook for the sector remains bleak. This as the large-scale capital projects required to boost the sector more substantially remain elusive and could be that way for some time to come.
It is expected that red meat and pork prices may increase this month as consumers prepare for Christmas celebrations. This means cash-strapped consumers will have to dig deep into their pockets. So according to meat producers, A-grade beef has breached a 50 kg mark and was more than 15% above prices achieved at the same time last year. Meat producers are bracing themselves for a merrier Christmas than most. Lamb and mutton prices were currently 28% and 40% higher respectively compared with last year. So pork producer prices remained above 30 Rand kg, with pork and bacon prices standing at 15% and 9% higher respectively than at the same time last year. Prices of these meat categories are currently the strongest they have been in years. So experts expect that this trend to continue into December and possibly for some time beyond. The Red Meat Producers Organization says stronger beef, lamb and mutton prices is good news for producers, but this means cash-strapped South African consumers will have to dig deep into their pockets if they are looking to splurge on red meat and pork this December. The pace of the improvement in the manufacturing sector has slowed down in November. The Absa Purchasing Managers Index shows as declined to 52.6 index points in the month, down from the solid 60.9 points recorded in October. A reading above the neutral 50 points mark indicates expansion, while reading below 50 indicates contraction. So Absa economist Mielani Maluleke says the softening in domestic demand could be partly to blame. Absa says while still signaling an improvement in business conditions, the drop suggests that the manufacturing sector's recovery is starting to lose momentum. This is as output levels for many subsectors are nearing pre-pandemic levels and will need sustained demand growth to fuel a further output expansion. So news says orders in the index rather dipped into the neutral below the 50-point mark, partly driven by a renewed decline in exports export sales likely due to some parts of Europe again introducing COVID-19 lockdowns. Sentiment amongst purchasing managers is less positive on the back of rising coronavirus infections here at home. So the indicator tracking business conditions in 6 months are time dipped for a second month to 52.7 index points.
We're likely to see maybe the pace of improvement into the production numbers begin to sort of slow down a little bit in terms of how quickly we see the recovery take place. And of course, one of the things that was also quite disappointing in the survey was the sub-index measuring employment. We did see some moderate increases in September and October, but that sub-index fell again in November, suggesting that there's still a lot of pressure in the sector in terms of employment. In terms of more forward-looking aspects of the PMI, there was also some softening there. We certainly see it when we look at the expected business conditions sub-index that fell for the second month in a row. So perhaps suggesting that manufacturers themselves are not quite as upbeat about the pace of improvement in the months to come. So I think in general, just to kind of reiterate, it's another positive print. Conditions certainly still improving, but the pace of that improvement has come down quite significantly. It's likely that we're going to see that reflected in the output data as well.
The index is moving in the right direction. We are still concerned that at 29, it still means that about 70% of our market respondents are still dissatisfied with the prevailing market conditions. Now, looking ahead, the large-scale capital projects which are required to boost the sector more substantially remain elusive, especially in the non-residential sector. Now, the pandemic has meant that there is lower demand for office space, lower demand for retail space, and these are the kind of projects that are required to boost the sector, but a bit more substantially. And as a result of that, in our view, outlook in the sector, at least in the medium term, remains relatively weak.
Okay, so let's continue with our look at a number of sectors where we may see economic activity improving. Now let's get back into that construction sector, and on Skype we have FNB economist Siphamandla Mkhwanazi, and he'll be joining us on the line now. Hi Siphamandla, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Sister?
Well, thanks for joining us. What are you seeing as green shoots in the construction sector? Where does the hope lie?
Right. So, the sector has been under enormous pressure for quite some time. We are, though, starting to see some improvement in certain sub-segments, particularly in what I would term the informal sector, so the small-scale projects such as home renovation, home alterations, and that also is boosting retail sales among hardware retailers, and that is coming through in retail sales volume. So yes, there are some improvements within subsectors in the construction sector, but overall, the sector remains pretty much weak.
I heard that there was some problem in getting into the country sufficient building materials. What was happening there?
Yes. So the pandemic has meant that there would be disruptions in supply chains, both locally and globally even. And that is also showing in the confidence among building material manufacturers who are saying that demand at the moment is actually outstripping what they can provide the market. And that obviously is affecting negatively on sentiment there. But I think it's the kind of a disappointment we are happy to take, that at this stage demand, there are certain sub-markets where demand is actually outstripping supply. So of course, it's going to have an impact of delaying some of those building projects. But at this stage, it's the small projects that are taking place. It's not necessarily the large-scale projects such as building of a mall or building of office space and things like that. It's generally the small-scale project. Yes, it's going to have an impact, but it's going to be minimal.
Now, so what kind of building materials were we short of? What is it that we couldn't get in?
So it's stuff such as steel, it's stuff such as import of cement and the like. Yes, some of those things we do produce locally, but in certain areas and certain parts of the country, they rely a lot on imports.
Now, the president had said that there will be some shovel-ready projects and infrastructure projects are anticipated to be rolled out almost immediately, and government will be spending a lot in this area. Are your people gearing up? Is the sector gearing up to meet the demand coming from the public sector spending?
Yes. So according to our survey respondents, yes, they are looking forward to it, but we get a sense also that these stories have been told before, so they would want to actually see something more tangible before it can actually translate into.
So they have to see it to believe it first.
You have to see it to believe it. Yeah, but yes, the positive is that there are certain areas where these projects have started taking shape. So, for example,
like where?
In the building space, in the residential building space, you would have seen some announcements around residential buildings in the east of Pretoria, around planned buildings in Sandton, for example. So there are those announcements, but we haven't really started seeing anything worth talking about, and that's what market participants are telling us, that they would really want to see something more tangible before it can translate into their business decisions.
Realistically, when can we expect those mega infrastructure programs to begin to be rolled out? Yes. Those major dams, those bridges, those port developments, and so on. Yes. When are you seeing that coming through down the line?
So naturally, these projects, construction projects in their nature, do take a long time to plan. You must also think of what the value chain is. It will start with architects. It goes to quantity surveyors. You need to get approval from the municipality. So it's quite a long process in its nature. And then therefore one should expect to start seeing these projects somewhere around about 12 months from now. It's when you can really see something more tangible. But the kind of projects that have been noted are the kind of projects that are required to boost the sector at the moment. Yes, there are those improvements we have been speaking about, but they are small they are small scale projects, certainly not enough to give the kind of a boost we need in the industry at the moment.
What's your detailed outlook? Can you just spend some time describing what your view of the outlook in the construction sector is and why you believe that is the case?
Yes. So at the moment, we are seeing some activity in the residential space. And that is driven by people spending more time at home, wanting more conducive spaces for them to work from home. So from that perspective, there is a bit of positivity, but it's a small sub-market. It's a small industry within that construction sector. So even that, with that positivity, it's not going to be enough to lift overall output. Now, on the non-residential side, the impact of the pandemic has meant that there's lower demand for office space because people are working from home and some have been retrenched. There's also lower demand for retail space as e-commerce starts taking shape in South Africa and we practice social distancing. There are certainly less trips. We frequent much less than we did before the pandemic. So that would mean that demand for such buildings, non-residential buildings, for office space and more, is going to take a bit of a knock. Now that translates then into subdued activity in the medium term in the sector. Now that's outside of any intervention from the government. Now, should we see any substantial intervention from the government, it would certainly boost on the civil side. So the building of the roads, the building of bridges you mentioned earlier. So in other words, the sector will rely heavily on the civil subcomponent, and that is a function of how much government is willing to spend and how fast how fast they can implement those projects. And that's a difficult part. That's one of the difficult things to try and focus, because those projects also have long processes before they can actually be implemented. So everything that is within the control of the private and the household sector doesn't look so good, and as I've explained, there's less demand for non-residential buildings. So all hopes in the sector right now are dependent on how willing the government is to go through with what they have promised.
Siphamandla Mkhwanazi, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Now, the Northwest has been urged to take advantage of its geographic location and its treasures to kickstart its economy. The province convened a meeting in Sun City near Rustenburg to discuss post-COVID recovery. The private sector committed here to working with the provincial government. Itumeleng Khajane and video journalist Tumi Khabutlane has the story to tell.
Mining remains the main economic driver of the Northwest, while agriculture and tourism are also major contributors to the province's GDP. All these sectors took a knock during the hard lockdown. Jobs were lost and some businesses closed their doors. The province's unemployment rate currently stands at an average of 28.3%.
When you look at the difference between the first quarter and second quarter this year, you saw that the Northwest province lost the jobs. And then when you come back and look at the second quarter to third quarter, the Northwest gained some jobs. So there are industries that actually managed to gain jobs. Transport sector is the one that actually gained some jobs.
The tourism sector, the retail sector and the transport sector have been severely impacted due to COVID-19, and that has been due to the various levels of the lockdown levels, especially during lockdown level 5, 4 and 3.
This gathering sought to turn this bleak picture around.
We have identified comparative economic advantages in each of the districts, and now we have decided to roll up our sleeves, and on the basis of those comparative advantages, we are growing the economy. And we're doing this with the greatest aggression. They've got an airport called Mahikeng Airport, the longest landing strip in Africa. It's just deserted, isolated, and when they need to revive it and bring the license which was taken to Pilansberg, which is a national airport, not even a national airport, back to Mahikeng, and then take advantage of the gateway to Congo, Angola, Botswana, using the airport or using the borders with Botswana, so that trucks can move and take goods that are manufactured in Northwest, jobs created in the Northwest.
The mining industry in the province is slowly recovering.
The impact was significant, and I think we as an industry were very fortunate that we were able to get back to full production, and the prices have supported us as an industry. So we're fortunate in that respect.
Role players say all have to roll up their sleeves to create much needed jobs. Itumeleng Khajane, SABC News, Rustenburg.
Welcome back to Economics Unbound. Now let's take a deep dive into the automotive industry. And to speak more about the dynamics in that industry, we have Auto Trader CEO George Maine and the National Association of Automobile Manufacturers CEO Mike Mabasa. Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Retail sales in terms of cars, how are we looking this festive season? Are people going to be keen to buy? What are the dynamics that you are seeing and the trends you are seeing in your sector? Let's start with you, George.
Tandeke, I think it's first probably pertinent to point out that, South Africa's economy, and Mike will tell you this as well, the automotive sector contributes 6.8, almost 7% to the GDP. And I don't think that takes into account the entire automotive retail sector. It's much higher than that if you include used car. So during the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown, we saw a sharp drop in search and a sharp swing to used car and a decline in new. But since the first day of lockdown, we've seen steady growth and strong search and conversion metrics through our website. So the swing to used car and the appetite for the consumer to buy used cars is very, very pointed. And I must say that hasn't stopped going. As a matter of fact, in November itself, we've seen a almost 50% growth year on year in search and conversion on Auto Trader's website.
What's search and conversion? For the ordinary listener.
People searching for cars on Auto Trader's website. And
so you're basically saying there's an increase in people searching for cars and they have a preference for used cars. Why is this? Can you explain?
I think mainly because of the increases in prices of new cars, which Mike can tell you much more about, and the rough time that we saw coming into the 2020 year, given the lockdown situation and people, watching what they spend, you can get a better used car at the moment than what you can get in the new variant for the same amount of money.
So because cars have been so stationary for so long, like many cars haven't been driven a lot this year. So you're saying that because of that, we can get a pretty decent used car coming onto the market, and there could be fairly a lot of those available at the moment.
Well, I don't think it's because they've been stationary. It's because you can potentially get a better deal as a result of the car being 1, 2, 3 years old, and it's priced better than a new car.
Yeah. And what are the other trends that you are seeing?
Well, we're seeing the swing to used. We're not seeing prices fall off. There are pockets of value in the used car industry, and I see that continuing. So, while we see a sharp drop in search and conversion and car sales for the used car market in December, usually, and a very, very big bounce back in January, that may not very well occur during this December as people remain at home.
Right, and why are people not buying these expensive new cars that have been put out on the market? What's the aversion? What is the price differential before COVID-19 lockdowns and now? What is the percentage increase on average for a new car?
Tandeka, I think Mike is probably better placed to answer that question. From a used car point of view, we've seen stable pricing. From a new car point of view, Mike might tell you that prices have increased.
Right. Mike, why have new cars increased in price?
Well, thank you very much, Tandeka. We have actually seen a different, trend. Prices have not necessarily gone up in terms of new vehicle pricing. In fact, we've been offering a lot of our customers, some fantastic deals, particularly now during COVID-19, mainly driven by two factors. So the first one, as you know, South Africa is currently going through a recession. A lot of people, disposable income has shrunk, tremendously. People are not able to spend as they used to because of the demanding and obviously changing economic climate in the country. As you know, the two biggest rating agencies in the last 2 weeks have continued to obviously indicated that they would be degrading South Africa, which obviously compounds our current economic challenges even further. We are very grateful, in fact, that this year, in fact, we've seen some very significant drop in terms of interest rates. You recall that the South African Reserve Bank has actually decreased interest rates this year quite significantly, something that we've never seen previously. And that has really helped a lot of consumers to be able to, go for new vehicles and buy new vehicles. I think the numbers that we are seeing are actually beginning to show us a very interesting trend, particularly from the month of September up until now, where we are really beginning to see some robustness coming back into the system. And I think to George's point, George indicated a very important point that while you're seeing an upswing in terms of brand new vehicles being sold, you're also seeing a shift of consumers choosing to buy second-hand vehicles.
George was actually talking about the second-hand market, and we were relying on you to tell us about the new cars.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a correlation between the two, because remember, new cars are important market and supplier to the second car market. So without the brand new car, you don't have the second-hand market, because the one is obviously the supplier to the other. And the two are very, very much linked. So what we are seeing is that a lot of customers, particularly now this year in particular, have actually, because of the economic challenges that I've spoken about earlier on, they've obviously elected to shift quite tremendously into the second-hand market because of issues of affordability. And we've also seen a lot of customers, in fact, moving away from your premium brands into more affordable brands in the market, as opposed to those big brands that we currently have in the market and so on. So, and those are very interesting trends that we're beginning to see. Now,
Mike, let's talk jobs in your sector. I come from Uptick, which is a big car manufacturing area. And I'm concerned about any bleed in terms of job losses in the sector. What have you seen? What are the manufacturers seeing?
Well, look, I think in the manufacturing space, we're actually very, very, very fortunate. I can confirm to you that this year in particular, we have not seen job losses in the manufacturing space, particularly amongst the key manufacturers that we have in the country. In fact, for the third quarter, we've actually recorded an increase in terms of jobs of around 415 new job opportunities that have been created within the industry. So we've taken a decision, and most of our manufacturers took a decision that they will not be going onto a wholesale retrenchment drive where they're going to be offlaying people out of their jobs.
Why did you take that decision?
Well, look, I think we recognize the fact that obviously people are going through, hard times, and we felt very strongly that the industry will rebound, and we're beginning to see that. So remember, the South African car market is increasingly becoming an export-driven market, particularly for brand new vehicles. We are currently in South Africa selling more vehicles out of the country than we actually sell them in South Africa. 64% of what we are producing in South Africa today is not sold in South Africa. It is going out of the country to 151 different markets across the world. And those markets, most of them continued. Our export book continued to be very robust, and we were still be able to export most of those particular vehicles out of the country. So it doesn't make sense, because we are a demand-driven business, and we respond to demand. So people place an order, and once that order has been confirmed, we then manufacture our vehicles, because a lot of people today are now buying what we call bespoke cars. You walk into a dealership, you prescribe exactly what type of a car you want. You want a car that has a sunroof, you want a car with leather seats, and so on. Once you've packaged the type of vehicle that you want, only then that car, unless it's available on the floor, but if it's not, only then that car can be able to manufacture. So it didn't make sense for us to really go onto a huge retrenchment drive, because we still need our employees, and they've really added a lot of value to the work that we do.
Last word to you, George. Are you picking up many stranded cars from people who have been retrenched and in financial distress? Cars in good nick from stranded owners?
So, Tandeke, what we did see during lockdown, particularly level 3, 2, and now into level 1, the private sales, the consumer-to-consumer market was very buoyant and is still very buoyant, which is consumers looking to offload their cars or sell their cars in the private market to other consumers. And now you can imagine if you trade a car in, you're not going to quite get the same price as what you would get if you sold it to another consumer. So that's an indication that people were under financial pressure. And oftentimes when people are under financial pressure, change their behavior. And we saw a change in behavior and search trends quite significantly one day after lockdown. People started searching for cars in the middle of the night. People started searching for bakkies when President Ramaphosa decided to open up food deliveries. We saw consumers buying down. As a matter of fact, the surge in searches for under 50,000 Rand cars and under 100,000 Rand cars surged between 15 and 29% just after lockdown. So to answer your question, yes, there were good deals in the market, but because of the high demand for used cars, prices seem to be quite stable even up to now.
George and Mike, thank you very much for joining us this evening on Economics Unbound. It certainly has been very fascinating discussing this with you. And that's thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks,
and that's
Tandeka.
how we come to the end of our show. Khonantini Mawetu, thank you for joining us on Economics Unbound.